Carl Jung discovered something that makes most people deeply uncomfortable. Across decades of research, he found 3 psychological lies that almost everyone believes about themselves. These aren't small mistakes. They're complete distortions of reality that destroy relationships, sabotage careers, and keep people trapped in cycles they can't escape. Today, you'll learn what these 3 lies are and how to spot them before they wreck your life. The first lie is the most dangerous one. It goes like this: I am the victim of everyone else's malice. This lie appears when you start projecting your shadow onto others with absolute conviction. Here's what that actually means. You see the worst parts of yourself, the parts you refuse to accept, and you unconsciously place them onto the people around you. Therefore, you genuinely believe these distorted perceptions are real. Jung documented this pattern in patient after patient. Someone would walk into his office convinced that their spouse was manipulative, their co-worker was plotting against them, or their family members were trying to control them. But when Jung investigated these claims, he discovered something disturbing. The behaviors these people described in others were actually their own denied characteristics. They weren't just wrong about people. They were systematically projecting their shadow onto everyone in their lives. This creates what Jung called a reality distortion field. The person projecting their shadow doesn't just see you incorrectly. They convince others to see you through their twisted lens. Their conviction is so strong that it rewrites reality for everyone around them. Therefore, families turn against innocent members. Workplaces destroy good employees. Communities exile people based on accusations that exist nowhere except in the projector's unconscious mind. Time runs. There are 5 unmistakable warning signs that reveal this dangerous pattern. First, absolute certainty about your motivations. They don't say, "I think you might be trying to hurt me." They say, "You are manipulating me," with complete conviction about your internal state. Second, complete immunity to contradictory evidence. No amount of explanation or proof can shake their beliefs. They interpret your attempts to correct them as further confirmation of their distorted perceptions. Third, emotional intensity that's wildly out of proportion to the actual situation. Their reactions reveal the projected content living in their unconscious, not anything you actually did. Fourth, consistent victim narratives, where they're always the innocent party wronged by others. The cast of characters changes, but they're forever the one being betrayed or attacked. Fifth, recruitment behavior, where they subtly or overtly try to get others to see you the way they do. They spread their concerns through conversations that sound caring, but are actually attempts to build a case against you. When someone projects their shadow with this level of conviction, their brain literally creates an alternate reality. Modern neuroscience shows that during intense projection, the same neural networks activate as during delusional states. The projector isn't consciously lying. Their filtering system has been hijacked by unconscious content. Therefore, they pass every lie detector test because they genuinely believe their distorted version of events. Here's what makes shadow projection truly terrifying. The projector unconsciously recruits others into their alternate reality. Jung called this collective possession. When someone presents their projections with absolute certainty, other people experience psychological pressure to align with that certainty, rather than trust their own contradictory observations. This is exactly how scapegoating happens, how entire groups turn against one person based on projected accusations with no basis in reality. The danger escalates in a predictable pattern. First comes initial projection, with subtle accusations that don't match your reality. You dismiss them as misunderstandings, but then conviction crystallizes. The projections become more frequent and certain, despite your corrections. Next is reality distortion, where everything you do gets interpreted through their projection filter. Neutral actions become evidence of malicious intent. Stage 4 brings social recruitment, where they share concerns about you with others, always from a place of apparent care or worry. Then comes collective possession, where others begin seeing you through the projector's lens. You find yourself defending against accusations that seem to come from nowhere. Finally, systematic exclusion happens. The group organizes around the shared projection, excluding or attacking you for qualities that exist primarily in the projector's unconscious mind. This pattern reveals a tragic irony. The person becomes the very thing they fear or hate in others, all while maintaining complete unconsciousness and feeling entirely innocent. They condemn manipulation while manipulating. They attack cruelty while being cruel. They accuse others of what they themselves are doing, and they have zero awareness of this contradiction. But shadow projection isn't the only dangerous lie people tell themselves. The second lie is even more insidious because it looks like virtue. It sounds like this: I am perfectly righteous and enlightened. This lie appears through two related mechanisms that Jung studied extensively: ego inflation and archetypal possession. Ego inflation happens when someone becomes consciously convinced of their own righteousness. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. They appear spiritually evolved, morally superior, or intellectually enlightened, but they're completely blind to their shadow. They identify with archetypal energies like the savior, the wise one, or the judge. These are roles that exceed their personal capacity to integrate. Therefore, they become possessed by something larger than themselves while believing they've achieved some kind of superiority. The inflated person doesn't project their shadow the way others do. Instead, they stand above it. They position themselves as having transcended the darkness that plagues normal people. But Jung discovered that this apparent elevation makes them infinitely more dangerous. People willingly submit to their authority because the inflation looks like genuine spiritual or moral development. There are clear warning signs of dangerous inflation. First, they never doubt their own motivations. While authentic teachers express humility before life's mysteries, inflated individuals exhibit absolute certainty about their perceptions and judgments. Second, they interpret disagreement as evil, or resistance to truth itself. Questioning isn't processed as useful information, but as an attack on goodness. Third, they display extraordinary charisma combined with completely rigid thinking. Their conviction creates magnetic attraction, while their inflated state eliminates any psychological flexibility. Archetypal possession takes this pattern to an even more disturbing level. This is when someone's individual identity completely disappears, replaced by something ancient and impersonal. You can recognize this state when someone's personality seems to vanish. Their eyes change, their voice changes. They speak with an authority that doesn't belong to their personal experience. They might become possessed by the eternal victim, always suffering and demanding rescue, or the righteous warrior, fighting cosmic battles against evil that only they can perceive, or the divine parent, treating adults like children who need their guidance and control. Here's what makes archetypal possession so dangerous. Archetypes contain extreme polarities. The same energy that produces saints also produces fanatics. The person possessed by the savior archetype will inevitably manifest its shadow aspects. They become the very thing they claim to oppose. Therefore, the spiritual teacher becomes a manipulator. The moral crusader becomes abusive. The enlightened guide becomes a tyrant, all while maintaining their conviction that they're serving a higher purpose. Jung warned that inflated individuals eventually collapse under the psychic tension of identifying their small ego with these transpersonal contents. But before they collapse, they cause devastating damage through their absolute conviction in their own righteousness. They destroy relationships, shatter communities, and wreck lives, all while believing themselves to be forces for good in the world. The third lie people tell themselves combines two patterns into one toxic belief. It sounds like this: I am defined by my public image, and I'm a victim of my painful past. This lie emerges through persona identification and the compulsion to repeat unresolved trauma. Persona identification creates what Jung called the perfect person problem. Someone becomes so completely adapted to social expectations that they lose all connection to their authentic self and shadow. The mask they wear in public becomes the only identity they recognize. Therefore, they invest all their energy in maintaining a flawless external image, while their rejected shadow aspects accumulate in the unconscious like pressure in a sealed container. The danger isn't obvious, because persona-identified individuals are often models of social perfection. They always know what to say, how to act, what expressions to wear. But this perfection conceals a terrifying emptiness and mounting pressure. The warning signs include uncanny social perfection, where they never seem to have bad days or inappropriate reactions. An artificial quality pervades their interactions. Despite technical correctness, something feels hollow or performed in their presence, and they have extreme reactions to any perceived threat to their perfect image. Any challenge triggers disproportionate defensive responses. Jung documented how these individuals experience sudden shadow eruptions. All their repressed content explodes in destructive ways. The more perfect the persona, the more chaotic and dangerous the eventual shadow explosion becomes. A respected professional might suddenly engage in shocking behavior. A model citizen might abruptly act out in ways that destroy everything they've built. The eruption seems to come from nowhere, but it's actually been building for years beneath the perfect surface. This connects directly to the compulsion to repeat. Persona-identified individuals often believe they're victims of cruel fate. They obsessively recreate the same painful situations with different people, always following surprisingly similar scripts. Therefore, they seem genuinely surprised each time the pattern repeats, as if they're victims of destiny rather than unconscious architects of their own recurring drama. Here's where it gets really dangerous. People trapped in repetition compulsions unconsciously recruit others to play roles in their unresolved psychological dramas. Without realizing it, you can find yourself playing a part in a story that began long before you met this person. Usually, you get cast as the betrayer, the abandoner, or the persecutor. They unconsciously emit signals that attract precisely the people who can help them recreate their original traumatic scenarios. Jung called this negative synchronicity. The person orchestrates encounters that perpetuate their unresolved patterns while maintaining complete innocence about their role in creating these situations. They end up in identical, painful relationships, jobs, or conflicts, always insisting that other people or circumstances are to blame. But the common factor in every situation is them and their unconscious need to replay the original wound. These three lies work together to trap people in cycles of suffering. Shadow projection makes you see enemies everywhere. Ego inflation convinces you of your own superiority while blinding you to your darkness. Persona identification and repetition compulsion lock you into playing out the same painful scripts while believing you're a victim of fate. Therefore, people spend entire lives trapped in these patterns, destroying relationships and opportunities, all while maintaining complete unconsciousness about their role in creating their own suffering. But here's what makes Jung's discovery so important. These aren't just abstract psychological concepts. These are predictable patterns you can learn to recognize and protect yourself from. The moment you understand how these lies work, you gain the power to step outside their influence, both in yourself and in others. Jung developed a protection protocol that's deceptively simple but incredibly effective. Conscious awareness combined with immediate boundary enforcement. First, trust your gut. If someone's perception of you consistently contradicts your internal experience, trust your internal reality over their projections. Your lived experience matters more than their distorted interpretations. Second, don't try to convince them. Shadow projectors, inflated individuals, and possessed people are immune to contradictory evidence. Attempting to convince them often strengthens their projections or inflation. They'll interpret your efforts as attacks or as proof of your guilt. Therefore, save your energy. You can't fix their unconsciousness through explanation. Third, limit the information you share. Don't provide personal details that can be twisted into evidence supporting their projections or used to recruit others against you. Fourth, seek outside perspective. Talk to trusted people who know both you and the projector or inflated person. Reality, check your perceptions with individuals outside the distortion field. This helps you maintain your grip on objective reality when someone is actively trying to gaslight you. Fifth, document interactions when necessary. Keep records of conversations and events because projectors often rewrite history to support their narratives. Having documentation protects you from their alternate reality. Sixth, withdraw when necessary. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play. If someone shows multiple dangerous signs and you have the option to extract yourself, do it without guilt. Your psychological health matters more than trying to fix someone who isn't conscious of their own patterns. The core protection is maintaining conscious awareness of what belongs to you and what belongs to them. This consciousness becomes your shield against the most dangerous psychological forces in human relationships. When you can distinguish between your authentic experience and someone else's projection, inflation, or compulsion, you're no longer vulnerable to their unconscious manipulation. Jung spent decades studying these patterns because he recognized something crucial. The most dangerous people aren't consciously malicious. They're unconscious of their own darkness while being completely convinced of their perceptions. This combination of unconsciousness and certainty creates a toxic force that can destroy lives, relationships, and entire communities. The person projecting their shadow genuinely believes you're the problem. The inflated individual truly thinks they've achieved some form of superiority. The persona-identified person actually experiences themselves as victims of fate rather than architects of repetition. Their conviction makes them persuasive. Their unconsciousness makes them dangerous. Therefore, learning to recognize these patterns becomes essential for psychological survival. Here's the beautiful part of Jung's discovery. When you become conscious of these three lies in yourself, you break their power completely. The moment you recognize your own shadow projections, you can choose to integrate rather than project. When you see your ego inflation or identification with archetypal roles, you can step back into your authentic human scale. When you catch yourself in repetition compulsions or over-identification with your persona, you can choose conscious change instead of unconscious repetition. Consciousness is the antidote to all three lies. Not positive thinking or self-help platitudes, but genuine psychological awareness of how your unconscious mind operates. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming conscious of your whole self, including your shadow, was the most important work any person could do. These three lies represent the obstacles everyone faces on that journey. The first lie says, your problems are caused by others' malice, when actually they're manifestations of your unintegrated shadow. The second lie says you've transcended human darkness, when actually you're possessed by forces you don't understand. The third lie says you're defined by your image and doomed to repeat the past, when actually you're unconsciously choosing these patterns moment by moment. Breaking free requires brutal honesty with yourself. You have to be willing to see your own shadow, to acknowledge where you project, inflate, or identify with masks instead of authenticity. This level of honesty is rare because it's painful. It's much easier to blame others, believe in your own specialness, or claim victimhood to fate. Therefore, most people never escape these three lies. They spend entire lives trapped in patterns they refuse to see. But you're different. The fact that you're still here, still listening, means you have the courage to look at these uncomfortable truths. You're willing to examine your own psychology instead of just pointing fingers at others. This willingness to see yourself clearly is the first step toward genuine freedom. Jung discovered that people could transform these patterns once they became conscious of them. Shadow projection became shadow integration. Ego inflation became authentic humility. Persona identification became genuine self-knowledge. Repetition compulsion became conscious choice. But this transformation only happened when people were willing to face the lies they'd been telling themselves. The three lies everyone believes about themselves aren't universal truths. They're psychological traps that most people fall into because of unconsciousness. Shadow projection, ego inflation combined with archetypal possession, and persona identification leading to repetition compulsion. These patterns destroy relationships, wreck careers, and keep people trapped in suffering. But they lose their power the moment you become aware of them. Your choice is simple. You can remain unconscious and continue believing these lies. You'll keep projecting your shadow onto others, convinced they're the problem. You'll maintain your inflation or persona perfection, never seeing your own darkness. You'll repeat the same painful patterns, always blaming circumstances or other people. Or you can choose consciousness. You can integrate your shadow, embrace your authentic humanity beyond inflation or masks, and break free from unconscious repetition. Jung spent his life mapping these dangerous territories, not to create fear, but to create freedom. Freedom from unconscious manipulation by yourself and others. Freedom from projection fields and inflation and compulsion. Freedom to become fully human, which means accepting all of yourself, including the parts you'd rather deny. The most dangerous sign isn't in other people, it's in yourself when you believe these three lies without question. The moment you recognize that you project, that you inflate, that you identify with masks and repeat patterns, you step into a different level of consciousness. One where you're no longer a puppet of your unconscious, but an active participant in your own psychological development. That's Jung's gift to anyone willing to receive it. The map showing where the traps are hidden, the three lies that trap almost everyone. Shadow projection, making you see enemies instead of mirrors. Ego inflation and archetypal possession, making you feel superior while being possessed. Persona identification and repetition. Compulsion, making you a slave to image and unresolved patterns. Now you know what to look for. The question is whether you have the courage to look honestly at yourself and others. If you found these insights valuable, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you recognized any of these patterns in yourself or people around you? Your awareness might help someone else see their own psychological traps. And if you want to explore more of Jung's revolutionary discoveries about the human mind, make sure you're subscribed for the next deep dive into psychology that can genuinely change your life. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.